This conference will now be recorded.
What I really need to do is get back up to speed on my brother's research.
Marie, you're out of bed.
I figure.
Yeah, she's upright for the moment, it appears.
Boy, no kidding. That's excellent.
I don't know whether they can hear us.
We can
Can
hear
guys
you.
hear us? Okay.
Hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties with the Wi-Fi today. We've had some problems as of yesterday and today with Cox, and our Wi-Fi has been up and down all day.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll make this short. Roberta looks like she's in costume, ready to go.
I am ready to head out as soon as we get done.
Okay. All right. So let's do our best to make this an hour meeting, Roberta.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm clear, so it's all good. Whatever you need.
Okay. All right.
Anybody hear from Ron this morning?
From who?
Barb, did you hear from Ron?
Yes, he texted me just a bit ago and asked if the meeting was still on. So I was assuming that he'd be coming your way.
Okay. Here he comes now.
Speak of the devil.
No, he's an angel.
I don't think I know that part.
Yeah, do you know where the cabinet is? Our supply cabinet? The supply cabinet in the copy room.
What does she need?
The pencil. Do you have an extra one on you?
I do not.
We would take.
So
Yeah,
where Ron and Steve are sitting, it's hard for us who are not there to hear them. Is there any way you guys can snuggle up around the mic a little bit more? You don't have to keep your 6 feet distance.
She wants you and I to snuggle. No.
No.
Not happening.
There's no fraternizing among board members.
Yeah.
I think Barb's frozen.
There she goes. She's moving now. Okay.
I just have to remember not to do anything else. Okay, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is our board planning meeting. And the purpose of the meeting is to help us prep for the upcoming board meeting on the 9th so that any motions that might need to be addressed are outlined for us and that we can get them submitted to Darlene in a timely manner so she can prepare the board packet, and also for us to have initial conversation on that. So that'll be the primary focus of today, but also knowing that we also want to look at things a little more long term. But let's start first with making sure that we've addressed the items that might be coming up as recommendations from the committee. So why don't we start with the safety committee, because I know definitely that there's a motion coming from them. So Roberta, or is George in the room by any chance?
No, George.
No, George.
Dave Greider? Okay, Roberta, why don't you go ahead and tell us about what the safety committee has worked on?
Sure. So I just recently, because I hadn't seen it come across, sent it to everybody on the board. They have a number of recommendations that I've viewed, and I agree with them immensely on this. I think this might help to curb some of the issues we've been facing. Number one is painting speed limit signs, whether it's 20 or 15 miles in the appropriate areas. In 4-foot lettering. They have identified several roadways throughout the resort, and they're listed. I'm not going to go through them now for brevity purposes, but when you open your email, you'll see the entire list. And what I would ask then is, Darlene or Mike, if you see any problems with that, then just kind of highlight it and let's talk about it maybe real quick before the board meeting. But they were very specific, like, Lariat between lots 30 and 31. They were really detailed on this, which is great. Or Nellie Bell between lots 717 and 718. So these are areas to paint the speed limit in 4-foot lettering. The next one is to paint yield at 3 intersections that are listed. These could be the first of many to follow should this become a viable option. The areas they're talking about is Little Doggy at both intersections and Hereford at the Maverick intersection. And I think these are locations in what you call the triangle, where there's no stop signs at all. Does that make sense, Mike, Darlene?
I'm sorry?
Did that make sense? That little small section way over in off a Trigger. I don't have my map in front of me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's the teardrop section.
Correct.
Yes, teardrop section. Thank you. That's it. Not triangle, teardrop. The other thing was, and I got to get a little more clarity on this to see if there's a cost or if the PD department will supply it, but placing a portable speed limit signs in locations throughout the resort and then move them to different locations to keep the signs fresh and attention getting.
Roberta, you're breaking up.
Sorry,
Please.
I'm not moving. I'll repeat. How about the placing portable speed limit signs?
Let me read it.
Oh, you have it? Okay.
I'll read it for you. Number
Because I
3
didn't know that.
on the document here says placing portable speed limit signs in locations throughout the resort
Oh,
and
it is.
move them to different locations to keep the signs fresh and attention getting.
Correct. And again, I don't know. I have to get clarification. I'm assuming that might be something that the police department might loan us. I'm not sure. I have to clarify that. The next would be number 4. They talked
I
about.
think what she said, I'm sorry, hold on, Robert. I think what I have to check this involved in that or if they will loan them to us, correct?
For the PD.
Yes.
Okay.
Number 4 is the thank you for slowing down signs.
Okay.
Hold on.
Number.
Roberto, hold on. Let me try to make a change with our Wi-Fi. We're having.
Sure.
While you're doing that, number 4 is place thank you for slowing down signs at prominent.
Correct. Can you hear me?
Let's try that.
Okay. Number 5 is to install the 3 rows of white bot dots in specific areas, such as the north on Happy Trails, the northbound lane, approximately 50 feet past the golf cart entrance to Great Eagle parking lot, and then before the stop signs at Trigger and Dale Evans.
Yeah.
Also on Tumbleweed at the drain by lot 1041, because that seems to be an issue. And then between lots 1025, 26 and 1001 and 1002. The other thing I will have to get another clarification on this is talking about install solar powered lighting on the stop signs located at Happy Trails Boulevard, at Trigger and Dale Evans intersections.
Roberta, on that, wasn't there also some conversation that there was some concerns, particularly from people at the villas, because those intersections are so dark, that they wanted them lightened up so that traffic could see them crossing in the crosswalk?
Yeah, and that deals with passenger traffic or foot traffic, and we really hadn't come up with anything just yet. I think safety is still working on that due to the fact that that may be a cost that we hadn't considered as to how we can do some type of motion detection lighting there. But then the other concern comes with the residents that live in that area to ensure that when the lights come on, it's not invading. I guess that's the word I want to use, but it's not a nuisance to them at night. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so then this request, then just for clarity, is just that the solar powered lights on the stop signs in those two locations would be on anytime it got dark, not that they're motion sensitive. Am I right?
That is my understanding. Usually I think
Okay,
those are more on a flashing basis, yes.
okay,
And
thank
I'll
you.
clarify that and the cost factor involved. Number 7 is the really interesting one, and I agree with them on this. It is to allow bicycles to yield at stop signs. So that means we need to change, alter the rule that we have on bikes having to stop at stop signs. This would place the burden on the bicyclist, and this keeps the roadway safe in hopes that, also it helps because we've heard issues of residents having to stop. It creates a problem. They could possibly fall down. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I know that is a continual thing that is brought up. So if we allow the bicyclist to have a yield factor, I mean, obviously, if nobody's at the four-way stop signs, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to yield. So let them yield, but this will put the burden on the bicyclist. And I think that's really important to impress upon the residents.
I'd like to go the opposite direction and put in signs that say stop signs that apply to bicycles as well.
Well, the intent was with the safety committee was to try and make them as safe as possible and answer everyone's questions. So if this is something that the board is not willing to do, then we'll have to consider that. I do support the safety committee. I think they're right. We have bicyclists. They're all how old, they ride quite a bit. If they are able to see that there's no one at the stop signs and they're riding in the road, then I would say they should go ahead and be able to yield.
I see them fly. So
What do other
almost
board
had-
members say on that
had
issue?
some very near accidents. They come in through and come up by the mailboxes the wrong way. They cut diagonally across the town center parking lot. And you know as well as I do that the visibility is limited in the town center parking lot because of the 3 lanes of parking. And they just pop up from nowhere, shoot across that parking lot, right through the stop sign over by the pickleball courts and right on out the other side. They don't even
Yeah,
slow down.
I understand, Ron, but as we've talked before, we have to also contemplate what can we enforce. And unless we have patrol that's authorized and has the ability to enforce that with some type of citation or ticket, you can educate the people as much as possible, but those are the same violators and they're going to continue to violate. The wrong way is a continual discussion among the safety committee, but there's no way to correct a bicyclist from coming in that way. And I've actually heard of residents who have stated statements to people that are coming in the wrong way with their bicycle. And the actual response normally is they're just blown off or they're told to mind their own business. I think, and this is just Roberta, that we have to put the onus, if we're going to allow that to happen, or that's what happens, we have to impress upon the bicyclist that the responsibility and the onus is on them.
Well, yeah, to a degree, but we have international rules about stop signs, yield signs. And so the recommendation from the safety committee is that none of the trail, you just yield and don't worry about it if you're on a bike.
No,
You're asking people to relearn 50 years worth of road laws and road rules to accommodate a bicycle. And that doesn't make sense to me. We put bicycle lanes in streets, but they still have to stop at stop signs and they still have to yield where it says yield. They're considered automobiles from the standpoint of rules of the road. I don't think it's going to help us to allow him not to follow the rules of the road that we've all learned, or we're at least supposed to learn, over the last 50 years or more that we've been.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, we may have some people that now try to tell every person that's on a bicycle they don't have to. And I'm now in a vehicle, and who yields? It's crazy. You're going to have people running into each other. I don't think that makes any sense at all, personally.
That's the only one that I have a strong feeling about, but I really have a strong feeling about this one.
If I recall.
Jackie had a statement.
Go ahead.
I agree with Ron and
Steve.
Steve, sorry. The same reason that I said.
Okay.
In the previous safety meetings that I sat in on, I think that, well, I know that these recommendations came from a small group who got together to come up with them, and they looked at lots of aspects of it. I believe I heard that in the state of Arizona, do not have to stop at the stop sign, even though it is in our rules. And their belief was, we have so many issues with that right now, why not just change it to yield? As a person who rides a bike, I do find it cumbersome to come to a complete stop at a stop sign, particularly when there's no traffic. When there's traffic around, I will stop. But if I look every way and I don't see anything, I'll do a little California stop and move on. But I agree completely with Ron that we see so many people just not even doing that, just completely ignoring the stop sign completely, as if it doesn't apply to them, and not looking anyway, other than the way that they're going. So at this point in time, I too might question whether that is something that we'd want to take action on right now. The issue really is getting people to assure that they're stopping where they need to be, and maybe the items outlined above of putting the speed limits and the stop signs and thank you for slowing down and all that might help remind people that they need to stop at these signs.
Right. And remember, when you say that, that's not just applied to bicyclists. There are plenty of people in golf carts and cars that aren't really doing the stop sign situation either. I agree with, Ron and Steve. This is, I support the yield piece because it does, like you said, Barb, make a sense when there's no cars around. But certainly the question is going to come up when the car and the bicycle comes to the stop sign, who yields? Well, in that case, there shouldn't be a yield. It should be everybody stops. Again, all we can do is make a decision and then impress upon through education and importance to the association. I'm not going to die on my sword for that one. It makes no difference. I will go either way on that one, but I think the rest of the recommendations that were listed are very viable options to help the association.
I think you all need to be concerned too about liability, because for them, for example, what we used to call, and cars do it all the time too, what we call a California stop, kind of cruise through the intersection. But cruise through the intersection and get hit, then there's a liability there, because we've allowed them to just cruise through the intersection. So there could possibly be for the community. So we really need to be careful there on what we allow, or how, if we do allow this, how we word that rule change or alteration.
Of course.
So would it be feasible?
Question from Sue.
Oh, go ahead.
How in the world would you mark out on the pavement? So bikes knew it just meant them, and cars didn't think it meant them. The clarity would be very difficult, I think.
Could you repeat that, please?
She was claiming that the clarity would be difficult in conjunction with vehicles not being subject to the yield, but bicycles being subject to the yield. And how would we clarify that with a sign or painting on the asphalt without that being confusing?
Well, it would be a rule change, so we wouldn't really, I don't foresee us putting it out on the asphalt, or you could probably put bicycles have yield right away or have yield capability, but that's just another sign. And you know how I feel about more signs. We just get inundated with too many signs and nobody reads them.
Well, Roberta, I think you bring up a good point. Let's talk about items 1 through 6. Those are all recommendations about signage and trying to get it so that it's safer. But only number 7 really is a rule change. So we could keep 7 out of this motion at this time and then offer it for consideration as we look to change the rules and regulations.
Correct. I agree.
What does the rest of the board think about that?
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay, all right. Okay. The safety committee has done an awful lot of work on this, and I think it'd be helpful, particularly for this, the signage to make, they're trying just to improve that we've got correct signage throughout the place that's properly alerting residents to what needs to be done. And I think that it's something that we should support. So Roberta, will you and George work with Darlene to get this in the form of a motion so that it can get put into our packet?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else from the safety committee? Go ahead.
Sorry, we got to delete this in. I just wanted to add to that the Pony Express has reported a lot of the signage that we have existing that needs to be maintained or improved, including stop lines painted on the road. So I just wanted to say thank you to the Pony Express for putting together this spreadsheet for us so that we can look into maintenance of these existing signage that we have that may be discolored, faded, unsightly, because it's just been there for quite some time. So just a big thank you to the Pony Express, and we'll be working on getting some replacement signs made for all of the signage that's existing, and or paint lines that need to be improved or reapplied, I should say.
Okay. So one of the things I recall, I think you mentioned at the safety meeting, was there was some issues in whatever area was done this last year on asphalt, and that the asphalt company actually repainted the signs, and it was not consistent with our standard. So as we move forward with any asphalt project this summer, I think we need to make sure that that's clear in the contract of who's responsible for repainting on it. Okay.
Agreed.
Regarding the thing you just mentioned about the stop signs and street signs regarding Pony, is there anything in that you anticipate that the board needs to be concerned about budget, or is it all things that could potentially come under operations?
Yeah, all operations. It's pretty minimal. We have the templates and the machines to paint the lines on the street, and we have vendors to put new vinyl on our existing signs or create new signs for us. I don't think it's going to be anything that's significant enough for board review. I just wanted to kind of update as we were on this topic.
Good. I think that's good. Roberta, is there anything else from the safety committee that we need to address at this board meeting?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. Let's talk about communications committee. Is there anything that we need to address at the upcoming board meeting?
Is George stepping down as chairman of the safety?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, he is.
You find a new
Chair.
Yeah, that'll be part of the committee's responsibility. Yeah. Okay. Marie, do you feel up to saying if there's anything from the communications committee that we need to address at the board meeting?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All righty. Let's talk about.
Jackie's going to be.
Yeah.
Jackie's going to be. They're going to formalize Jackie's
Position.
Oh, that's right. So we need, because currently she's a non-voting member, and we need to make her a voting member. Okay. So we'll need a motion for Darlene to put that in our packet.
Yes, I guess we could.
Yeah, that's just a formality, but it needs to be done.
Roberta, has George formally given you notice about his, I'm not sorry to jump, but has George given you formal notice that he's stepping down?
I did not get it, but Barb got it, yes.
I haven't received anything in writing. He mentioned it at the meeting. Okay. So is Brad there? I don't see him.
Yes,
Yeah.
come on down.
Have a seat at the table. So let's do the easy part first. Is there anything on from a variance perspective that needs to come to the board this month?
Have something. I don't know that it will be as a variance per se. It's a request for a sidewalk in the villas. So it's a you're familiar with the scenario.
Yes.
Or I don't know that we would call it a variance. It's on the board that will be seen on the agenda. Addition in villa in reference to villa space 2187. Or BGM, probably BGM.
Yeah, it was discussed at BGNM this morning, and it really was talking more about from an ADA perspective, correct?
Right.
And I think we all need to remember that we technically do not need to comply to ADA standards because we're not a hospital, a restaurant, a nursing home, a retirement community. And so it's not something that we are required to do. Now, we happen to comply with ADA in our restrooms and in our access to the ballroom and into the chuck wagon, because those places we allow outside people to pay us revenue to come to shows and use the restaurant. So those are areas that we do comply with ADA standards, but other than that, in our common area, we don't. If they would like to discuss this possibly from a fair housing perspective and asking us for a reasonable accommodation, then that's a different avenue that they would need to go with. And so I would like to request that Steve, that you and Darlene and Steve and I have a conversation about this to see how we might proceed. Steve, how do you react to that?
That's fine.
Okay, so if as a result of that, we determine that it does need to move forward to the board, then we'll add it to the board. Okay. All right, so Brad, I know that you're not planning on bringing the villa recommendations to this board meeting for approval, but it is something that we've had some preliminary conversations that we certainly would like to get finalized by the April board meeting. So can you give us a little background on what you're doing, just as an FYI for the rest of the board and for the audience. There's been issues in the villas for a while, and at the, I believe it was the October, we're listening session at NC1, Mr. Chilcote and others were there, and they mentioned that when the changes that work that the villa people and Steve brought forward for the replacement units, when those changes that were approved by the board went into place and put in the DRC guidelines, they felt that some of the prior villa guidelines inadvertently got eliminated. And also they felt that there were some things in the villas that the board really should address, and that the DRC guidelines should change, specifically related to the villas that was in addition to the replacement structures. So since then, we've asked Darlene when she was new on board, and Mike to go out and have a meeting with them on one Saturday, which they did, and spent almost 4 hours with them. And then as a result, the DRC committee has done walking rounds out there, I understand, to get a better idea. And now there are some preliminary recommendations. So Brad, why don't you fill us in on what the plan is and all, and maybe then Steve can give us some input on how he sees that change, if there are any changes that from the other DRC guidelines. So go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, so I've been in contact with the Villa people, as they claim themselves to be, and working on new guidelines specific, a lot of to the languages toward the common areas and, improvements along those areas, going to the sidewalks and such. So we have a new version. I printed some out right now and I'll hand them out. I can email them to Roberta and Barbara if they would like.
Is that 9?
Yeah, this is version 9.
The board has received it.
Okay.
Yes.
And then what we have done, Dennis has already kind of condensed some of the language in the version 9 that I'm handing out as we speak. And then, so Dennis has kind of went through it and condensed some of the language. We've combined some of the, replacement models and new models language in that sense. So it's kind of condensed in an area that we can hopefully attack when we have our meeting next Tuesday. We're going to have what we're calling a Villa advisory group to hash out all the details and get something to get approved or to get in front of the board.
So that meeting that you're talking about next week, is that your regular DRC meeting, or is that a specific community meeting of the Villa?
It's going to be a specific meeting afterwards. Now, there was talk from some of the committee about attacking some other guidelines that want to be changed, turf regulations, parking, et cetera. So but the Villas is the main course, and it's going to be after the DRC. So yeah, it's a separate meeting, but pretty much following the DRC committee meeting.
So when you talk about turf and parking, is that specifically to the Villas, or is that elsewhere?
No, that's going to be more for the community. And
Okay.
It was, as we're doing this, there were some questions that were brought up. So it's kind of, I imagine, be the tail end questioning as we sort out the Villa regulations and guidelines.
What's a pre-manufactured home?
Mobile home.
A HUD home.
Yeah.
Single wide, double wide, snuggle wide, pre-manufactured.
Pre-manufactured.
It's pre-engineered. Manufactured home would be defined as the pre-manufactured home. It can't be referred to as, what is it? Walls. You know what I'm talking about? Men in pieces, like
It's like a modular home.
home that's built in pieces versus so pre-manufactured
And then
home
comes
was
up.
pre-engineered home.
Okay. Park model.
Right.
Built outside the park, brought in as a unit.
Yeah, you gotta really watch this closely as far as total square footage.
Yep. Correct.
Because we're so limited in there and limited number of manufacturers that make homes that
Accommodate that location.
would meet our needs.
Right.
See why we want to put a new one in there, but it's certainly gotta be not to exceed so many square feet.
Right.
Well, and to give a little backstory on this design guidelines is that when we revised, we were caught in a scenario where a home needed to be replaced immediately. And our documents, we kind of discussed this in BGM this morning, our documents didn't support that replacement. So in doing so and revising, there were some things that were changed because in conjunction with the city's guidelines, meeting setback requirements, code requirements, things along those. So when we remove the opportunity for an existing villa to be added onto, in addition to an existing villa, the theory behind the committee standpoint was that it wasn't going to be rational to add on to an existing villa because you might only get 3 feet or so that would be permitted to add on because of setback requirements. What we're hearing from the villa residents is that that could be beneficial to them. 3 feet is still 3 feet. We could do a closet extension. We could do a bathroom extension. We could put a walk-in closet or something along those lines in scenarios. Now, it's still permitted by the city of Surprise, still engineered, still, all of the I's dotted and T's crossed. However, that was something that didn't get into the design guidelines.
Walk-through are the same size.
No, most are. Most are. Some of them are a little larger.
I know that some of them, if you put any addition to it, you'd be encroaching on community property.
Right.
Especially with the additions already in place on some of the homes.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of them aren't the ones that have additions are most likely not going to accommodate. But it's kind of strange how it was written before. The guidelines said that up to half of the existing length of the villa on one side of the villa could be added onto via stick built. So it was really strange how that was written, and it wasn't to a certain square footage. It was to a length of the existing unit. Didn't have it setbacks. And when I started here at House, the mentality was the city doesn't have any objection. We're just kind of there and we can do whatever we want. That was very much so wrong. We learned what improvements are going into the villas. They're just not objecting to what's existing. If something's existing up to a property line, they're not requesting someone remove it. They're just going to object to any additional space that's location. So this is kind of just wrapping back around to that, as well as the changes that have come forth to the issues with common area, sidewalks, pavers.
What do the current DRC guidelines state in regarding to the minimum square footage and the maximum square footage?
The maximum, I believe, is 965 and the minimum is 502.
I think you're right.
So this would get it up to a maximum of 1404. That's bigger than I have in my snuggle line.
Now it says it's combined with the shed, so technically it would be minusing the 100 square foot shed. So it takes it down to, I believe it's 1304 is what they were hoping for. And that's with the 14 is the.
Personally, I think that that's more than that's plausible. Yeah. I know, for example, the replacement home, 880 square feet was put in on Villa Space 2187. So, I mean, I think they could get more than that. I know that they have setbacks on the ends that aren't to the maximum length. But the problem was they were having trouble trying to find a house because they went manufactured home. They were having trouble trying to find a house that was going to fit exactly to the maximum. So they ended up with 880. The reality is I don't think that anyone with a property over there is going to get 1,400 square feet with city regulation. At that point in time, they have to meet code. So, is 14 plausible? Probably not. But is it going to be reasonable for the city? No. I mean, they're not going to be able to encroach beyond that. Only where that number has came from.
I think the idea of a bigger home. I'm not sure there's any direct.
The property,
Mm-hmm.
the village property line minus the setback.
Okay.
So you say that you could build out only the fire. That's where and what they're putting together is different because
the 3 foot or 5 foot difference.
Yes. Firewall will allow you to have 5 foot addition onto your building.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
To the property line because it's firewall.
Yes.
Rather than a 5 foot setback, a 3 foot setback with a 1 hour rated firewall. The most of the resort not regulated to a 5 foot setback like package 6, package 10. So I get where you're coming from there with that larger setback requirements, which would leave 3 feet around the entire without any additional or anything along those lines. That would be maxing out the property
line.
Steve, what do you see did you see any red flags in any of this?
I'm not able to anticipate the creativeness of anyone in their property.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, there have been a number of additions, screen patios, rooms, and we have been very willing to say no. And so that has been an issue. But in particular, the only one that raised a flag with me was the same one Ron just talked about, is how in the world can you get 14 feet? 1,400 feet, thank you.
Yeah.
See how you can get that many square feet. It has to be addressed, because if we don't address it, it will be addressed for us. And we got to this solution for replacement, which only applies to about 20 units. Maybe we could manufacture home on, as we did on Sunset, because you can't get them in there. And at one point somebody said cranes, and now that's not legal. So we only have a few that fall in there. I just caution people, you need to read it carefully, because if there's any opportunity for interpretation of what one of those segments says it can be, you'll be there. I mean, it's just the reality. I'm not being critical, and it's not just the villas. You know, the rest of the resort's the same way. How did they get a wall there? I don't know, but it's there. Now we're not going to take it down. So I don't want people to operate with it's easier to seek forgiveness than ask permission. You know, I'd like to put us in a position where they'll come in and get the report, fill it out, and they'll be able to have their structure rather than to define in their own terms and creativity that space. And we've got to make it pretty plain.
What is B Charlie 1? What is that? All villa homes and storage shall be all electric. Is that to keep them having gas?
Correct.
Correct.
No propane.
Propane.
No propane.
And that's consistent throughout the resort, isn't it? That any new unit has to be electric.
Yep.
So I like how they've laid this out, in that they have the general guidelines and definitions, and then they have things regarding existing villa and improvements. And then they've got a replacement section, and then they've got the villa storage shed construction and all. They seem to be fairly repetitious, but it's still well laid out. The only one as I go back to what Steve and Ron have mentioned, I just have a little bit of question as to whether 1,400 is really realistic, in that, is there even the square footage of land that they technically have that would comply with that without building out on a common area?
Yeah, what is the square footage on each of the villas? I was under the impression it was 1125.
No, the space itself is 1,920 square feet for the actual property itself.
Repeat that, Mike.
1920.
1920?
The space itself, they're 32 by 60 is the actual lot, and that's 1,920 square feet.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And then you're talking either 3 or 5 foot setbacks, depending upon whether you've got a firewall in there or not, right? Okay.
Correct. And the existing units, if without addition, are 660 square feet, which was the original villas.
The original villa was 600 square feet. Okay, yes, because the park model's 400. Okay. So given, just let's talk about a generic unit that's over there now, that's had an addition put on, and had just the the villa and whatever addition they've put on. What's your estimate as to the current square footage taken up by those in existence now?
I think there's some with addition on them that have gotten close to 1,000 square feet. If I'm not mistaken, I think right at 1,000 is what's existing now with the addition of the Arizona room.
Right, that's what I would say too, right around that 1,000.
Yeah, so to me, adding another 400 is where I'm thinking like, where the heck they gonna put that?
Well, if the regulation spoke to, you had 400 and it was half the length of the existing villa, there's the other half of the existing villa. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's essentially, now, if you're building onto an existing villa, picture it as a double wide. You know what I mean? Just for mental vision, picture it as a double wide. That's your other 400 square feet.
Yeah, but then where is their patio? That
There's
they'll be
not.
asking us, where they'll be asking us for a variance on. Okay.
The
Let's-
question I would ask is, do we really want to allow 1,400 square feet? I mean, it's plausible, but do we have to allow it? There will be, like Barbara just said, people are going to be asking for things.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate. What's the harm? What would it do?
We just say no whenever they want to do something extra.
You know, I mean,
If it was 14,
yeah.
they build out to the property line and then, they can't have any additions on it. No,
Right.
no cover, no patio,
And
no.
that means patio would go into common areas. And, that's gonna.
I think personally, you see more
Variances
use of
and
common
variances.
area.
We want- Just a question.
Well, it's a good question. And, I think it also, the question is whether,
Wheelchair access, is that currently being applied? At number 12,
what page, Ron?
the front page down here, wheelchair access.
Shall provide wheelchair access to all
Modification
buildings.
replacement shall provide wheelchair access.
No, it's not being applied now. That's not written in the current design guidelines.
Ron, could you state where you see that?
2187 has come back
That's on B,
twice.
C
asking
12.
for
I'm not sure
wheelchair
if they have. I think they're looking at version 9. I don't think they have what we have here
Oh.
from Dennis.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They don't. They're looking at version 9. This was a modification from one of the members in the DRC committee. And he's claiming that within the requirements to add all modifications or replacements shall provide wheelchair access to the villa entryways. And we don't have to do that. That doesn't have to be written in there. This was a suggestion from one of the DRC committee members in aspect of discussion. I don't think that that's necessary and it's not a requirement. His suggestion was for the homeowner to provide modifications, replacements for wheelchair accessibility if there is changes made to the property, which I don't think that we can enforce. So I don't know that it's really necessary to be there.
That would be on a case by case basis.
Right.
Not every home, like I don't have one in my home. So it would depend, that would be on a case by case basis.
I don't think you want them in the, you need to.
Right.
You don't want them on the guidelines.
And these are a rough draft. I mean, we're still hashing out a lot of this stuff. So, the wheelchair accessibilities, that is still gonna work on.
What's the applicable? Oh, this says section 20. What is section 20? In the C, I'm sorry. C raised decks near the bottom.
Section 2. I think that's what they meant, 2. I don't know why. An XX villas, there's section 2 in the villas. Why it was XX, I couldn't speak to that. It's section 2.
And again, yeah,
Okay.
it's a rough. That's what the whole meeting on Tuesday committee is gonna hash a lot of this out.
I would like to ask that there's on that 1,400. See it,
Well, I think,
somebody's gonna put one in. We just dealt with one today on an 800 square foot.
Well, and if it's,
And they want something more.
and if I remember correctly, they're not dead set on that number. It's just the idea of getting more square footage for their homes is the idea. Not necessarily
Yeah.
that they want that exact number. It's just a matter of a bigger home they would like to
Yeah, but
replace.
I agree with Becca. I mean, if you give them all the way up, so what I'm hearing,
They're in place. We do not have to accommodate that. I really think that's going to be an issue.
Understandable too, yeah.
Down the road, if we allow it to be 1,400 square feet.
Everybody starts to.
Okay. Go ahead, Roberta. Roberta's got her hand up.
Yeah, and from what I'm understanding, and we're breaking up a little bit, is you're talking the 1,400 square feet. That takes them right to their lot lines. And I agree. I think once you allow that, then there's going to be the person that says, well, I want a patio. I want this cover. I want an awning. I want to be able to sit outside. And we can go back and say you should have thought of that when you bought the house that's right on the lot lines. But you know that's going to come, and that's going to go right in. Those patios, those awnings, they're going to go right into common ground.
Yeah, okay,
If they want to be in section 2,
right.
bottom line, in my opinion.
Well, and we have 9, what's written as of now in the design guidelines for maximum square footage for a
It's
stick built?
965, I believe.
965
Yes,
is what's
it is.
currently.
So I think
It
if
is
we could,
965?
what I hear the consensus is most of the board is feeling that you take back to that group that we're having a little heartburn over the 1,400 maximum.
We'll do that, absolutely.
And then the thing about the wheelchair access,
Yeah, that should just come
again,
off.
we are not required to follow ADA standards. And when I looked at purchasing property in Happy Trails, I did look at some villa properties. And even if I look at my own Snuggle Wide, the interior is not wheelchair accessible. These doors wouldn't qualify in a wheelchair. A park model doesn't. So if the interior is not wheelchair accessible, I don't see why we need to have exterior wheelchair accessible. Okay. So back, Steve, did you see any other significant things that were different from the group that you led earlier?
No, and I think it's important for everyone that's online here and that's listening to this. This is step 1, 2, or 3 of probably a 10-step process before they get to when we did the replacement of the one that flooded. We were back and forth many times before we came up with those final recommendations that the board did adopt. You know, this is the way the process needs to work. We need to put our concerns in there so that Brad has something to take back when he meets with those folks. And it will be different than it is today when we finally get to the point. But we know that there are a couple of things that have been given to Brad that he can now take back and say, these are true concerns that the board has. Look at it as, oh my, or they can say, well, out of 20 some, you know, we'll get there. And it's just a negotiation process. I think as long as everyone is concerned about the resort and the owners to the same degree, that you'll come up with an answer that works.
Have we addressed the issue of driving on?
That's the thing included in this document. It's not just existing structural items, but one of the major reasons that we started this scenario and these modifications are in conjunction with use of common area, utilization of common area within specifically in section 2 of the villas. And in reference to sidewalk issues, accessibility issues, encroachment issues, and this is very, very frequently seen by the board of directors. What we're trying to do with the villa folks are establish some sort of guidelines would be acceptable. We've had we've permitted walkways in between sidewalks and patios for accessibility. We've had scenarios where we've denied patios onto common area property because it was presumed for additional, space to enjoyable space, I guess you could say. However, this is something that we do, is are utilized by they're having their common area parties, they're having all this stuff within these quads. And it's something that we're really looking into. What's a guideline? We don't have something written as of now, like what's acceptable versus what's not acceptable for addition onto common area. Right now, it's really something that we've always just taken to the board for discretion. We're trying to pin that down so that we have consistency. And right now we've had some that were approved in the past and some that were denied, and why, and we don't have a reason. We don't have an explanation. I mean, there's some explanation within minutes and justification of what was approved, but having a specific guideline so that if a future villa owner comes to Brad and says, hey, I'd like to do an addition, does it meet this criteria? And if it does meet such criteria, maybe if it does not meet such criteria, and that we willing to
Going over there and looking at some of the variances, I became more aware of the fact that the ground lighting and stuff like that is being run over because there's not room to turn the corners.
Oh, yeah.
And
we got awnings and structures that are hit by basis. We have a lot of concerns in that location that a lot of the reasonable don't, unfortunately, some of these spaces, for example, we've had requests in the past for, say, I'll give you an example, artificial turf. That's this 2-foot section in between the sidewalk and their patio. That's technically common area property. So the regulation has always spoke to that was not permissible. But if there were guidelines upon this, would it be permissible? Document responsibility and whatnot, all documented within this guideline. So how do we do that? And that's was this approach, is temporary changes to villa common area requirements. And that would compose the opportunities for, say, removable items such as pavers, artificial turf, things like that, not concrete that are permanent. We're staying away from concrete, as we had a lot of drainage concerns. We had a lot of accessibility for utility concerns where we've had to cut up concrete, break up concrete. We want to stay away from that. I think the villa owners agree that they want to stay away from the concrete as well. But the pavers and the turf and the areas like, are really hazardous. If the patio's here, any harm to the association? No, other than how do we manage this?
yeah, because in most cases it looked like an addition of pavers would make it so much
It would.
easier to navigate through there. And then, of course, Mike Perry says sidewalks are not designed to be driven on. Good point.
They weren't initially, yeah.
The problem is they've always been allowed to drive on. Well, not always, but for I don't know how many years.
I'm sure always.
Maze, if you're not used to going over there. I got stuck one night trying to get out of it. John Chill.
They wanted you to stay.
10:03 at night, and I know the neighbors wondering, who in the world's turning around outside my bedroom?
So regarding the drainage issues and all, is on page 5, section 6. It reads to me, and remember I wasn't part of this coming up, so I don't know really the intent. It reads to me like they can make some changes to the drainage at their discretion. My concern is it clear though that they really have to get that verified by DRC, who then assures that it's not impacting drainage elsewhere, because that's what we've noticed throughout the villas, is all the changes that have occurred over the 30 years have impacted our drainage. Do we have enough requirements in here or process in here so that there's a check and balance, if you will, an oversight?
I think I think so. I think this is the discretion of the committee, the DRC committee, and the property owner on their private property. It is, I believe, this is what this is referring to here, is not outside of their scope of their property line. But we do have some concerns, many concerns with drainage on the actual property, as the villas themselves are typically sloped inward, allowing an excessive amount of water underneath the home. And we have dealt with these problems many times where they're modifying their drainage. But you're right, we do have to work with them in conjunction of, once they get it off of their property, we then have to get it off of common area property. And this is the start to that, because I don't believe that there is any current language within the guidelines that speaks to the drainage on their private property. And the downspouts, there's not even any regulation of where they go. You know, they just run all over the place, and if it floods out the neighbor, it floods out the neighbor kind of scenario. And the villa owners are very good about trying to look out for each other and run water elsewhere. But there's a lot of the times there's nowhere else to run the water. You know, it runs into the middle of a, you know, so I think that coming together with the BGM, topographical, you know, survey in that location will only improve our practices moving forward. And once again, like I referred to in the BGM meeting, another piece to the puzzle of this very large.
Yeah. So could you update the rest of the board on that conversation about the topographical study?
So
and who will be doing it?
Absolutely. We're going to be working with West Mech. They're a trade school. One of our committee members, I guess, has a foot in the door there, and we're looking to seek if they might be interested in providing services for surveying as part of their schooling education. You know, we're at the very tip of this here, so we're not sure exactly what we're going to be looking at, but it could be a good relationship moving forward with these trade schools, local trade school that we're referring to, you know, in the long term, getting them to provide services for us and educating them as they're very hands-on education services that they provide might be great. It could be a challenge for them, and we could provide, you know, we might get the services that we need at a more reasonable rate. And it could be a long-term relationship we have with the school. It'll be very beneficial for us. That's the direction the BGM committee is seeking. Dan O'Brien has taken on the task to communicate with West Mech.
Good. And they might have some ideas too, what kind of language might be in design guidelines that could be more generic, that would affect not just the villas, but some of the other areas too. So good.
Sure.
Looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to that. So I think for me, and I think I speak for the rest of the board, that we appreciate all the work that they've done, and we want to be able to honor the villa's residents to be able to make changes to and updates to their property, as long as we're confident that those changes don't affect others down the line. And I think that's what we're getting to here. Any other questions that the board would want answered at that for
I
Brad
think
to
she's
get
asking
answered?
for questions.
Am I breaking up?
Questions from the board members.
To give feedback to Brad.
I have a question for you, Barb. Have you decided on liaisons?
Yeah, not quite yet. As soon as I'm out of quarantine tomorrow, so I'll be coming up and talking to Darlene tomorrow about where our ideas are. At this point in time, I'm still planning that Steve would stay DRC, and that you, BGNM, and that Ron, that you would be DRC. That's where I'm leaning right now. I'm not taking any money under the table for this, but chocolate would be good.
My pocket yesterday.
This COVID has not affected my taste or smell, so. Okay, so with that, Ron, I would assume, Ron, that you would want to work with Brad.
sooner the better.
Yeah.
We'll cut down on the number of variances we.
I think on that number a little bit as
Oh,
far
yeah.
as it says, maybe all that owners,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We know that when this
that is bad wording.
version 9 will only have to be modified to fit within our language.
Never good wording.
No, it's
But
at owner's discretion really just
Right,
opens.
I think that
big door.
if they follow the process we did before, we got it to where we thought we knew what it was, and then we handed it to a wordsmith, and then it came back, and then we revised it again, and then it went back to the wordsmith, and then that's where we ended up.
Yeah, and it won't even be in this format, as our format of our design guidelines are going to be in conjunction with this. So it'll be added into the existing, modified with what's existing there. It's kind of,
Incorporate all of the points in some way, shape, or form. Already, no, it'll be April.
Can I just ask one final question on the color palette? Did they have discussions about the color palette that they wanted to follow? I know a few years
Yes.
back there was.
Yes, and we're going through, there was talk about maybe changing it from 6 to a little more up, all within our color scheme book. So yeah, it's still an ongoing process, but yeah, I think there was talk about changing it from 6 to about 8, but all within our color scheme book.
Well, but they had come through originally when we talked about them being allowed to stucco, that the color palette was limited to a number of them. And do they still want that sort of beigey stuff, or do they want it that it's any
definitely want
color
to play
throughout the community?
the color palettes. Provided a color book to their villa books over to the villa meeting. They met, was it last weekend or the weekend before last, 2 weekends ago, to review those colors, as the original colors they picked out were out of a stucco color palette, kind of off of what we out of the approved Sherman-Williams Association, and we will, within the guidelines, a way to determine these are the approved color palettes for the villas. And we'll notate those moving forward so that there's restriction there.
Do we have from the contractors or the suppliers to contractors of the material that goes on, colors that they now have available? Because when we first started this stucco thing, they were all.
So George initially was using, George Lamb was the first, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's the only to stucco in that location, only vendor to stucco in that location. And he provided us a color palette from Western distributor that he was using before. That's where the initial 6 colors were picked from. But as we've progressed further, the distributors that he's used, Sherman-Williams, and actually color out of that book and make it be a stucco color, named the same thing as the initial. Something along those lines, and this is for the entire resort, not the villas, is that it's difficult to rematch that exact color because they custom mixed it. So if you're going to restucco your house someday, you want to do patchwork, it's harder to match that color, which is, is it really that big of a deal because it fades so much anyway? You're going to have some fade discoloration. When you go with the natural color that's pre-mixed, where it's mixed by a computer, then you know that color is going to be consistent every single time. Is it that much of a problem? No, because it's the reality throughout the entire resort.
Good. Perfect. Thanks. Well, great. We'll be looking forward to hearing what their final plan is. Now, Brad, I don't want to have you and Mike feel that you're pushed, that we have to have a motion for the April meeting, but I really would encourage you to do that, because otherwise, realistically, if we try to get it as a community meeting so that everyone's aware, we're probably looking to the fall, and I don't know whether that group wants to wait until then. So do you think it's reasonable to do it?
Yes, I do, and we're in total agreement there. I think we're all on board. I think the Villa people and me and Mike that's exactly what we were hoping for as well. So
I think we can try to finalize some stuff on the 7th. Right, it's the 7th when they meet, and then for a draft of a rough draft to go to, or say, I should say, the final draft on the 11th. Sometime in between there, I presume everyone will receive a rough draft that we can revise and edit, look at. And then if we need to call another meeting by the end of March, so be it, we will, and have it ready for the 11th of April.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So how about the budget committee? I know, is there anything from the budget committee that we need to address that's coming forward as a motion to the board meeting, this upcoming board meeting? Becca?
We're working on a lot of things, but I'm not sure there's anything for the March meeting. I do want to mention the items that we want addressed sooner rather than later. Raising storage fees and going to seasonal renting or annual renting, how it is now, all that. We want to institute a fee for non-electronic billing for monthly fees. Now, that one I think we can get done, but we haven't even had the discussion yet. So we've had a preliminary discussion about it. But we would need to know what it actually is, the actual cost to actually sending out those bills. I know it changes all the time.
Yeah, I can
Implement a fee for that, for those people that don't want to get it, they want still. There's one that's more long-term. It's changing the CC&Rs to allow a 10% rather than 6% increase in fees. I personally want to work with the budget committee to bring back possibly the $25 fee that we talked about, because that would give us a nice bump and it might be easier than 10%. Fees, costs are never going to go back down. So we're going to have to, do something. The other thing is I want policy, and maybe this what comes from maybe management, about ensuring that residents understand they are responsible for paying for damage to the gates, walls, whatever they might hit, run into, cause a problem with. So that we aren't paying, because this year was horrible and having what we had to pay for.
Could that be a rules and regulations?
I would think it would be, or maybe it probably should be in the CC&Rs, but have we had issues with it where the residents refused to pay, or is it just because we couldn't find out who it was?
I don't think that it's been an issue yet, but reinforcement would never hurt. That language to, most of the time, if there is an incident where I don't think that we've had any objection to the payment if we know who it is. But, having that documentation just supports that.
Okay, yeah, good. Yeah, okay, good.
I think that's probably a rules and regulation thing, Barb. It seems like common sense, but I think if we reinforce it in the rules and regulations, it'll be covered.
Yeah. Well, that's nothing we really need to quibble about now, but just I agree that it needs to be in writing someplace, and residents are aware of it. Good. Okay. All right. So, did I miss a committee?
Elections. I know Vicky's on the line. I know Vicky has, I think,
thank you.
3 people she put Vicky speak. Vicky, are you there? Can she talk? She's on mute.
Looks like she is.
I think she dropped off, actually.
She might. Well, we'll ask her. Well,
no, I'm here.
Oh, she's driving. Vicki, is there anything that you need to bring to the board for a motion at the upcoming board meeting?
No, I would just like to know if anything's being done about the short-term rentals.
Oh, the wrong Vicki. Wrong Vicki. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Well, that is a question that we'll talk about at the board meeting. There was just something that I found at another website that I seem to ghost all the time, the Roadhaven HOA, and they're making a change to their CCNRs that states to the effect that anyone who owns more than 2 lots, it's considered a business, and therefore they're not allowed to own more than 2 lots as used as a rental. And I'm going to do some further investigation to assure that that really is, that our legal would agree with that idea. But as we met earlier with people about the rentals, I think people were concerned about short-term rentals and would like to see a change in that. Would you agree with that, Marie, that people were very in favor of changing limits on short-term rentals? It was the long-term rentals that
Yes.
people had. Yeah.
A lot of that concern, you know, of course, it was all around the Super Bowl, and a lot of it on Facebook and stuff, especially about the one woman who advertised quite about her particular lot, and I think a lot of people were very hyper on whether she was going to rent it over Super Bowl, and a lot of fears were unfounded because, to my knowledge, number one, her lot was not rented, and number two, I didn't, for one, and I don't know about you two gentlemen, short-term rentals that happened here over Super Bowl. And if we were going to, we would have certainly had them over Super Bowl, and or we would have, because it's spring training. Thank you much. And we're, so I extremely cautious for all of the, I think the fear is there, but the reality is not. So are we getting all upset and excited and up in arms over nothing?
Right. Okay. Could be. Okay. So we can talk more about that. So regarding some of the things that we had motions on last month that we said we would be making approvals at the March
Just
board
got
meeting.
it now.
Okay. Any, a second, I'm going to type. I don't know how to spell.
Update on bids for asphalt.
Not yet. We're still waiting on Michael. He knows that we're anticipating having some numbers prior to, March 9th. He's pushing for that. And I did hear from him last week. It was Friday. We communicated via email. He said he's still pushing real hard. He'll get with me as soon as possible, give me some updates and some numbers. Same thing goes for Bradford. Bradford, I had communication with not last week, but the week before last. He's pushing some numbers for us, and I hope to have on March. So as I get some documentation, I'd be happy to, we have requested some numbers for the NC1 as well as the other third of the town center. Now we know that that might not be plausible, but we want to have the numbers just in case, so we know what we're looking at for this year, this summer. So we hope to have those as soon as possible.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Darlene, is there anything that you know that that you've heard from others that will be on the agenda?
Have you heard from anyone else?
Morning meeting with Jason finally. Number of issues discussed. Not much progress made. Every time we got to a point where it got serious, he in that he says just because you don't want the water on my property, but understand the system. And we're still based on Roy Rogers. That's easily fixable. Meaning Happy Trails go in there and remedy the situation. And I said, but it's on your property. We're not supposed to be doing things to improve your property. And he said, well, it's okay with me to go in there and fix that. So, and he's very adamant about his wall on 1090. He's going to start on 1090, and if you go down there and look at that, it's just off the pickleball courts on the opposite side of the green. And he went to 2013 and showed us where previous owners built a non-removable structure on his, and he's decided a piece of the road. He decided to start there, and he said, well, it's just a good place to start, but it's because it's annoying to him that's there, but it's a awning, and it's solidly based and supported by footings that are on the golf course property. So we didn't make a lot of progress, a lot of things. We talked about Mrs. Freeman's mound of dirt behind her house to try to keep Mike from having to crawl under Mrs. Freeman's house. And I suggested that he could remedy that pretty easily by just going over there and taking that mound and spreading it out and putting a little bit of it along those houses and building it up so it would run off naturally when it rained. And he said, well, it was our people went over and did that as well. So
Repeat that again. What's the resolution on that?
Could you repeat the resolution?
Well, there is no resolution. I mean, it's if we want to go and do it, we can do it, but he didn't offer to do it anytime soon. And also, he said there is a T-Mobile tower already on his property.
Where?
And I was surprised at that.
And to speak, I did speak to him regarding the discussion. I know this is kind of changing subject, but regarding the tower that we will not be able to permit on our property. Jason's open to communication. However, TowerCom, the company that we were working with, never even responded.
I tell you where he offered to put it. If you go down Happy Trails and turn in to the RV wash, he offered to put it right there.
On the backside of the.
Yeah, on the backside of where the receptacles are for the cans and stuff like that.
That's not a bad location.
Yeah, I mean, that's close to where we're going to put it.
Yeah, close to where we want to put it, and it would be, I mean, he has a lot of property to put it on, but the question is accessibility. If he has to put it on something where he has to go through our residence property, that's not a good solution. But if he can put it on his property, easily accessible, and he has nothing there, I mean, the tee for the fourth hole is a good 30, 40 yards away from there, and that would give him plenty of room to do it right there on that corner.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know if he's heard from TowerCom. I asked Jason for permission to give his information to TowerCom. He said, absolutely. I wrote an email to TowerCom responding with what our obstacles and issues are going to be with our property, but what might be possible with the golf course, and they never responded. So
we did. Lauren presented him with our final solution on removal of that dirt that the board had said, no way. didn't have any comment. So that's a closed issue.
Okay, you didn't have any comment, you said?
No, that's a closed issue.
Perfect. At least we got something done there. But
Yeah.
we do need to think whether for the Freeman property, whether we'd want to go ahead and just move that mound and get that condition resolved.
Now, he keeps saying, I think that the property is higher in the front than it is in the back. I said, no, it's not higher in the front than it is in the back. And he said, well, I think the off of their downspouts at the front, and that's but he comes and I think, and then when you actually challenge him on that, he just stops and goes on to another subject. So if we can get him to fix that, my other solution was to put Joyce Freeman on the liaison committee and he'd deal with her. He'd be willing to do anything. Okay, that's it.
Okay, all right. Darlene, was there anything else that you thought that needed to be on the agenda?
Not that I have to go through my notes, but not that I can think of. I will put the roofs and the asphalt on there just in case we get all the paperwork in. I don't want to not put it on there and then we get them in at the last minute.
Yeah.
Because we do need to make a decision on that as soon as possible.
Right.
And then I'll go over some stuff with Mike to see if he has anything I need to add.
Right.
I will check with Vicki again. I know she did tell me that, or she sent me an email saying that people she the committee, so I'll check with her and get the names.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Some of the things I think we need to be thinking about for the future is, I think lots of different groups have talked about the trash location and all, and communications committee has just come up with a new little flyer that hopefully will educate residents on where things go. Mike, you've talked about this morning at the BG&M committee about the large red roll-offs and things that you're talking about there. And I think though we need a long-term I think we need a recommendation, particularly about the whole trash in general. Certainly don't need it now, but it needs to be on our agenda for this year that we come up with a final solution. Whether, as someone from the budget committee said, do we go nuclear and just not allow all the big dump storages, because that is an added expense to us, or do we have a way of charging residents for all the excess dumping that they do, because technically we're only required to pay for in-ground. So I think that's something we're going to need to have on our agenda. I think we also, go ahead, Roberta.
Well, I was just going to say, I think another thing we need to start looking at now is electronic voting.
Yep. I was just going to say that.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, because we have talked about potentially asking for front steps to come in and doing an assessment. So I think there's lots of things regarding technology of which electronic voting comes under. Along that line, at the BG&M
I have
committee.
one that's,
Go ahead.
I have one as well to do with clubs
Yes.
and assess and setting up a fund for them for their maintenance issues.
Yeah.
And all that entails, that is a big project.
Yep.
It's a big one.
We've got to get started on that.
Yeah. The other thing going along with electronic or technology is the key card access.
Yes.
So they mentioned that in the BG&M committee, and I think we need to talk about what our strategy is for that. BG&M, you looked at it in regards to cost per door, right?
Yes.
And wasn't it like a suck air amount per door?
$2,500.
$2,500 and $5 per card.
Yeah. So I think really what we as a board and the community need to identify is what areas do we really need key card access? And we know the pools are one. But if we are having key card access to the doors, what is it that we're trying to protect and or know? So obviously protecting assets or knowledge of how many people are using, and what do we need to protect in having people who are not non-residents or non visitors, to protect that people from some surprise farms aren't coming over. So we'll really need to be doing more on that this year. Well, I think I'm losing my voice here. So, and it is 11:30, and Roberta's probably got to get out on the range there and lock and load, as they say, huh?
Something like that.
Something like that. Anything else for the end of the order?
I think we're good on this side, Barb.
All right.
Okay, all right. With that, we'll call it an end and look forward to being out of quarantine. Bye-bye now.
Yeah.